Welcome to Beyond the Veil with Daniel Jackson, the podcast where we head down the road of the supernatural and beyond. So, sit back and hold on as we take a ride together to what lies in the unknown and beyond the veil. Beyond the Veil with Daniel Jackson presents guest hosts, authors and investigators Dan Baldwin and George Sewell. Dan Baldwin is a professional writer, often a ghostwriter for other professionals. He has written and co-written or ghosted more than 50 books and has won numerous local, regional, and national awards. He is a certified clinical hypnotherapist, plays the Native American flute, and is an expert pendulum dowser, having used the pendulum to assist in finding missing persons for over 15 years. George Sewell describes himself as a cognitive philanthropist, active in all aspects of theater, his undergraduate degree in speech and journalism from Northwestern State University in Louisiana, and a Master of Arts degree in drama and communications from the University of New Orleans. As a playwright, he has written plays for community theater, college theater, and dinner theater. Vocationally, he is retired as a counselor, program manager, and administrator in the field of addictive disorders, including problem gambling. And now your host, Daniel Jackson, with UFOs, UAPs, pendulum star people, alien abductions. What's next?
Welcome to Beyond the Veil with Daniel Jackson. I'm your host, Daniel Jackson, and today we have Dan Baldwin and George Sewell on our show today, and they are, I don't want to say you are just hunters or anything like that. I want to say you guys are more on the line of investigators. Would that be a good assumption?
We don't like the term hunter because it has a negative connotation. We're reporters, investigators, reporters.
Yeah, explorers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the same way. I'm not too much on the ghost hunting shows and all that stuff. They always show the negative side of it, and they never really show or talk about what this actually means. And it's from reading over these your bio here, it seems like you guys really delve into trying to find out what it actually means.
Yeah, George and I've been doing this for many years, and George and I have been doing it for a long time together. And we've never had what you would call a negative experience. Never.
Sure.
Not even close.
Yeah, me either. Not really. I haven't had anything negative as well. The only thing I've ever had with them is they just seem to want to get my attention all the time.
Right.
They like to talk.
Yeah, they do. Boy, they just talk about anything. I remember one time I was putting some blinds up in my office back in Delaware, because that's where we came from, and after I put them in, because I like it to be real dark. I can see them during the day and everything, but I can see them better at nighttime. And when I did that, a woman's voice came right through and said, "Hey, nice blinds, babe." And I was like, "Okay, thanks." And I said, "I just put them up so I can see a little better." And then she showed her face to me, and that's when I asked her, because Spirit has me. They want me to cross Spirit over, and that's what I do most of the time. And I asked her, "You want to cross over?" She said, "No, I'm good, but I'll see you later." Just turned around, walked away. I was like, "Okay, what do we do next?"
Just friendly neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely. They're just they're no longer in this this meat suit, this body anymore. They've just moved on. That's all. But people, it's just the TV and movies sometimes tries to make it a little bit more than it is, and I guess just because of the fear factor. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, we I think one thing, that they do that for ratings, obviously, but one thing that
it's money,
especially with George and the research George and I do, we don't go looking for it, and therefore
don't need to, do you?
It doesn't come looking for us.
Right, because it's just pretty much as I tell everybody, when you wake up and you do your daily routine and you get ready for work and you go to work and maybe you don't do your job, who knows? And then you come back home and you eat some supper and watch some TV and you go to sleep and wake up and do it all over again. Spirits around us all the time. They're just, not all of them want to be seen, but some of them do. But they don't really worry about what we do so much because they don't have to really do it anymore. They're not paying bills or driving cars, but they seem to be enjoying their lives. So I try to tell people that there's a different interest there. It's not so much the scary movie type of stuff, but people do get interested in that because they put so many scary movies out, which is unfortunate.
I think one of the reasons George and I have been so successful in making contact is we're not out there asking, would Cleopatra show up? Would Geronimo show up? We walk in and say, is there anybody here who would like to talk with us?
Yeah.
We carry on a conversation with all the respect in the world and all the courtesy in the world, just like you and I are talking right now.
Yes.
That's how we talk to whoever shows up. And I think on that side, they appreciate courtesy.
Yes, absolutely.
And they respond to it.
Yeah. Yeah, because they don't want to put up with the other stuff that's out there. I mean, they really do want to talk. It's just where they are all equal there, and they would still like to talk to us over here because they do miss it being over here, even though they have some other amenities over there. That's I mean, no one's in pain anymore, or no one's suffering anymore. But I'm sure they miss driving cars and doing all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, well, one of the things we've come across is a lot of times they come back here as a vacation, and we've used that word. Do you look at your visit here as a vacation? Oh yeah, I'm having a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of stuff to watch around here, so why not? So what is it that got the two of you or individually interested in this so much? How long ago did this start for you?
Well, yeah, ask George about that because he's the one that got me involved that led to the latest book.
Your turn, George.
Yeah. I've always had a lifelong interest in the paranormal, what you call the UFOs and that type thing.
Sure.
And back in the late 80s and early 90s, I was affiliated with the Mutual UFO Network as the Assistant State Director for Louisiana.
Oh, move on, huh?
Yeah, during that time, I had the opportunity to meet with a number of people in Northwest Louisiana who had personal encounters of various types and were absolutely frustrated at wit's end that there was nobody they could talk to about what had happened. Family members, clergy.
Yeah, you couldn't do it. The people thought you were crazy, but
absolutely. So they were very receptive to have a confidential ear. I was a counselor by training. To just listen to. They weren't wanting to explore what the reality of it was or anything. They just wanted to just get it out.
Yeah.
And very often I was able to reassure them that I had heard from other people very similar occurrences. And that kind of set up the background for what kicked off this whole project. And that was a couple of years ago. The phone rang one night. And I didn't recognize the number, but I was handling my late wife's estate at the time, so I answered in case it was part of that.
Sure.
And it was, is this George Sewell? Yes. Well, this is Lindsay Higgins. And so said, I could call you and we could talk. And I recognized the person that we both knew. And that person was aware of my interest in the UFO field. And Lindsay began a 2-hour conversation starting at age 2 up to the present. That was just filled with all sorts of paranormal encounters, involvements with what we would call extraterrestrials, a couple of, if you will, abductions, one of which is dramatically recreated in the Netflix episode 5, season 1 of Haunted. And that's actually where I met Lindsay in person, was when we were both on location in Los Angeles for the Netflix filming. And after that, Dan was in town on occasion doing research for his first 2 paranormal pendulum books, where we would go to haunted locations in Shreveport and Bossier, and with the pendulum, he would communicate with whatever the present was, and we'd find out who's haunting the Flying Heart Brewery, that type thing.
Sure.
And in that process, kind of introduced Dan when he was in town to Lindsay and her husband, and we all got along great. And it was just kind of well, this is where we got to go. The pendulum is a great investigative tool. And Lindsay, the reason this whole Netflix things came up was she has sat on all of her experiences all of her entire life. Nobody she could talk to. Family couldn't handle it. And she just reached a point to where she just had to get it out, literally. And she came across a podcast that mentioned that a Hollywood production company was looking for paranormal stories, if you will, true life paranormal experiences
Sure.
For the Netflix series. And she decided to use that vehicle, wrote up her experience, and after much hesitation, finally hit the send button, sent it out. And within 14 hours, she'd heard back from the company. Yes, they definitely want to talk with her about her story. The next day, she had a Skype interview. Boom. Yes, they booked it. So, I mean, it just went fast. Click, 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 click. And it was just a natural for Dan to come on board and let's find out what's going on with Lindsay Higgins. And that was quite the 2 years.
And do you believe that the Netflix series actually did it justice for her in describing what happened?
They captured the recreations. It's a 20-minute episode, so it's
Sure.
very brief. But what they're trying to do, they recreate some of her flashback memories of supposed abduction experiences, usually involving medical type procedures, which she was terrified of as a child. But they do a nice job recreating an event that occurred when Lindsay was a sophomore in college in Shreveport, where late one night she looks through a window and sees a bright light out in a part of the area that there's no lights out there. There should not be lights out there. And then the wall starts dissolving, and then the light beam comes in and literally picks her up, and as Lindsay said, jerked her out of the room. She grabs the ceiling, there's a ceiling fan, she grabs the blades, and she's trying to hold on, but it jerks her out the window, and off she goes into the craft. That gave a pretty good depiction of that event, and we have reason to believe it because, as Lindsay would say, she's not a very good housekeeper, and the fan blades were very dusty, and you could very clearly see her finger streaks across the blade.
Sure. And to me, it sounds like it was just a little bit too detailed to not be true.
Yeah, and then Lindsay, whenever she recounts any of her experiences, it's always the same. There's no deviation.
Right.
So,
have you guys kept in contact with her since then?
yeah, well, yes. Oh, yeah.
Does she still go through these experiences? I mean, because it sounds to me that when whoever it is being abducted, it seems as though they are abducted frequently. So they like to bring them back over and over and over again. Would you say that's a good assumption?
Well, let me pass that over to Dan to talk about a 6,000-year-old agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, Lindsay definitely has been, her experiences are definitely ongoing. The interesting thing that came out in researching this book is your listeners will and viewers will probably find most interesting. This case involves not only UFOs and UFO abductions, it also involves contact with the spirit world and also reincarnation. It's all kind of tied together. And from what we found out, and we don't know the full story yet, but what we found out is about 4,000 years ago, the spirit of the woman who is now Lindsay Higgins made an agreement with an evolved being, somebody from one of the, not an angel, but someone from a very highly evolved spiritual realm.
Sure.
And the agreement was that she would reincarnate throughout time in a long-term program to basically help the human species evolve into a higher realm. And that is what she is doing. And, it's been going on for 4,000 years. And apparently George and I are involved in part of that and have been involved in it for some time. We don't know exactly how long, but we're involved in that process also.
Yeah, and I talk to people all the time about reincarnation and why it happens, and we do keep coming back over and over and over again.
Oh, there was an interesting angle with that with Lindsay's family. Lindsay, her sister, and her father. As best we can determine, and we have some pretty strong indications that their most recent incarnation, other than the current one, was a father and two daughters living in Shreveport at the end of the 19th century and into the early 20th century. And the same dynamics were present, apparently the same activities with the quote abductions. I don't like that word, but the visitations, or
Sure.
whatever word you want to use, was occurring at that time and continues as they've reincarnated in the same family roles.
Right.
And that may have been a pattern that goes back to the beginning of when this started.
Sure. Sure. And have you since then, since you've been doing these in types of investigations, have you come across other people who are having the same type of experiences, or they keep coming back as well?
Well, this book was focused on Lindsay. We were very
Gotcha.
disciplined.
Gotcha. Well, sure.
And
because-
Lindsay's story, because Lord knows this thing could have gone 1,000 different directions.
yeah, if you got one real good story, you might as well stick to it and get everything, all the information that you can for that story.
Right.
Well, I mean, we as spirit, we sign these what we would call soul contracts, and everyone's soul contract is different from the other one. But I mean, we are very unaware of what we're actually doing, because in spirit it's different than it is here, and this is a learning place. But I mean, how do you talk to somebody about that, because they're not really truly aware all the time of all the times they are being taken until now. Now she does know. Now she understands it, I'm sure. But does she know now that she may have to come back and do this all over again?
She accepts that, and she reached a point to where she was satisfied that, okay, she did make an agreement, and she made an agreement, she would definitely stick to it.
Yeah.
But some of the other things that came out in the course of the investigation, and this was in Pendulum conversations with some of her deceased relatives who were very, very interested in Lindsay's story, was that growing up where she lived growing up was a very special place in and of itself. And some of the entities that she was seeing as a child were not just what you would call shadow people or
Right.
ETs or whatever, but it turned out were the spirits of Caddo Indians, Native Americans who lived in that area for thousands of years. And we went to the property upon learning that, and I'll pass it over to Dan because he had a method of working with spirits who may be earthbound.
Sure, because there are lots of them.
Yeah, well, in this case, this goes back to you've heard of the New Madrid earthquake, 1811.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a massive earthquake that gave the appearance of actually reversing. It was so strong it actually appeared to reverse the flow of the Mississippi River. Well, shortly before that happened, the Caddo Indians north of Shreveport had some kind of visitation. The chief said that we've got the message and we've got to get out of here. Our water is going to go bad. We have to go south to find good water. And the area to where they went was the area where there was some natural springs that have been there for hundreds of thousands of years, good clean water.
Sure.
And that's where they settled when the quake hit. They had good water. And one of those natural springs is on the Lindsay Higgins family property. And when we visited there, we had a couple of mediums working with us during this project, and one of the mediums noticed immediately that there were, I believe there were 6 spirits of Indians there. And we spoke with them, and they were there primarily. They weren't trapped. They were there because they really wanted to basically protect the property. They were out there to make sure that their sacred ground remained sacred ground. So we conversed with them. We convinced them that, the owners of the property who we knew, Lindsay's parents, actually her dad.
Yeah, he was present at the time.
He was present at the time. And we convinced them that, they respected property. They had only the best interest of the property, in mind. And we asked them if they wanted to stick around or if they wanted to cross over. 3 of the 6 wanted to stay around and remain with the property, but 3 of them wanted to cross over. So we actually crossed over 3 of the spirits at that session.
That's good. Yeah, because they don't. I don't believe they always get that asked that question as well. Because again, that's one of my things that I do is I cross spirit over, and but some of them do want to stay. Not all of them do want to cross over, but many of them do. But they all have many reasons for why they don't want to cross over. But yeah, I mean, that's a great thing now. But so the other three just decided that they were just going to continue on with the same deal of trying to protect the land itself,
Yeah,
correct?
this is my interpretation, but I think the three that crossed over felt like, hey, these are nice people.
They can
They're
do
gonna
it.
honor the property.
Yeah.
And the other three probably felt, a duty. They had made an agreement to stay there, so they probably felt like, well, this is our duty, so we'll stick around a while.
Yeah, this was just one episode of Lindsay's interactions, if you will, with the spirit world. It's not just with ETs. In fact, the book opens with a little detective work that Dan and I were doing to determine who was Lindsay's invisible friend when she was 2 and 3 years old. And let me summarize the story and then Dan can pick it up.
Yes.
In my phone call when Lindsay called that night, the first story she mentioned was back when she was 2 or 3, and her father's a restaurateur, and at that time he acquired a railroad station, Central Station, and converted it into a really nice restaurant, where the restaurant was downstairs and the family lived upstairs. And during this time, when the restaurant is active, Lindsay would be upstairs in her room alone. And on one particular day, she was just a little bored and really wanted to go outside, because there's a big, huge balcony above the first floor. And well, some people outside walking down the street see this little 2-3-year-old girl wandering around the balcony.
Right.
So they go inside and say, wait a minute. So everybody rushes upstairs, and yes, this big double hung wooden window has been opened, and Lindsay's hopped out and she's brought back in. The window's closed, and the question's asked, well, Lindsay, how did that window get open? Well, my friend Morlock opened it.
Right.
And that kind of got things started on a detective story where Dan was in town, and we were checking with some locations again that were known to have a presence. And just kind of on a lark, I said, Dan, we're near Central Station. I know it's closed, but let's go by there anyway, and let's see if there's any spirits present, because I sure would like to find out if a certain story is true.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And yes, there were. And I gave the story, and they said, yep, it happened, and I'm the one who raised the window.
Wow.
And now the search was on, well, who is this person? And that's where the pendulum really came in as a detective tool.
Yeah. When I talk to some people who I find out that their children also are able to have this ability as well, because most children have it because we're all born with it, but some of it fades away in our lives, because we get taught the ways of the world. It's basically the world throwing a bucket of bleach over top of us, and then start teaching us a bunch of lies in this world. But I tell people, someone will say, well, my daughter has this ability. And I say, so what are you doing about it? And I say, I don't know. What should I do about it? I said, well, she's able to see spirit. Why aren't you talking to your daughter to ask those spirits some questions so you can get some answers? And they all say, I never thought to do that. Why would you not think to do that? You have an information box sitting right in front of you, a little kid who can see people that you wish you could see. And these are people who are sometimes related to you, sometimes not, and they can bring you all kinds of information, and then you can find things out about how to get through your life a little bit better, because they know. And she was like, oh, I just didn't think about that. I was like, oh my goodness, what are you doing? But yeah, I mean, that's great for the so did this actual, this spirit, this being, did they continue to be with Lindsay throughout her life? Or has it since disappeared since then?
Not as active as when she was young, but we did ask, if the spirit is still interested in Lindsay, and of course that was the case.
Right. Right. Well, hey, I mean, at least as a little kid, she had someone looking out for her, and then that, which is really neat, but yeah, people want to find out how that happened. So after that story, after that person was helping her, who was the next, say, being that came in for her after that?
You stumped me on that one because Warlock, who was his real name is W.D. Woodworth, has stayed with her pretty much all the way through. He's her dad, so he's always kind of hanging around with her. And
Right.
we run into several spirits investigating around Shreveport, Bossier City, who knew W.D. Woodworth, and they were associates or family and friends, and we've run into them on several occasions.
Oh, so you've had spirit tell you about other spirit.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. We had
All
yeah,
over the
this
place.
this
awesome.
this investigation into the Morlock character was our true detective story. We had a spirit lead us to another spirit, who led us to another spirit, who led us to another spirit. We were directed like a detective story to find out who this Morlock character was, and we finally did.
Sure. That's, I mean, and who else better to ask than someone else who was also around that same time could tell you?
Well, and there's an interesting component to the asking too, Daniel. There was a session where we had Lindsay present, and specifically we were wanting to use the pendulum to speak with the spirit of Lindsay's previous incarnation as Sally Murphy.
Yes, let's get into the pendulum part and how that works for you, and how is it that you ask questions and get answers through using the pendulum?
Very specifically.
Yes, I have a pendulum. Yes, but I don't use it very often, but I have used it. And I had a friend come over to my house, and she brought it over, and I said, "Oh, that's a pendulum, isn't it?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "What are you going to do with that?" And she showed me, and she would ask it questions, she would hold it, and she would say, "Well, I'm going to ask back and forth as a yes, and side to side as a no." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." And because I was so new to it, I didn't really get what it meant. And she was asking the questions, and it would move a little bit here and there. But then I said, "Can I try it?" And she said, "Sure." And when I held on to that thing and I did the same thing, that thing was swinging back and forth and side to side.
Mhm.
And she said to me, "I've been using this thing for 5 years and I can't get it to do that." I was like, everyone's different, it works different for everyone. So how does it work for you guys?
Well, yeah, for me, a swing in a right circle is a yes. A swing in a left circle is a no. If it goes back and forth, that means I'm not going to tell you, or I don't know, or just you've asked a stupid question.
or rephrase the question, perhaps.
Sure. Because sometimes, like in the very beginning, when I was starting out finding out I was a medium, I was not always asking the question in the correct way.
Exactly.
So my wife said, maybe you should ask it differently. So that's what I started doing. Now I've got myself accustomed to doing that now, and that's how it works for me. So is that basically how it worked for you?
Yeah, I can give you a perfect example of how that works. Questioning is essential.
Yes.
I have done for about 20 years a lot of looking for missing persons work.
Oh.
And I would be working on a case, and I would ask, is this person alive? The obvious first question. And I always get a yes. But when we would find the person would always have been deceased by the time I asked that question.
But how are they alive? That's the thing.
Exactly.
Right?
See, eventually, after time and after time after time, they go, wait a minute. I don't believe people die. The body dies, but the person is still alive.
Yes.
So I was getting a correct answer. Yes, the person is alive. But I was my interpretation was wrong because I was interpreting it as meaning the physical body was alive.
Right.
So the point is the questions are key, and your interpretation of that question is really key.
Yeah, but some people ask me those same questions. Now, my question that I ask to get an answer, I say, is this person alive within a body? And then that's when I get a yes or no answer.
Yeah, I use, is this person physically alive? The same thing.
Yes. And so you also not just only use the pendulum, but you use dowsing rods as well, correct?
Yeah, mostly the pendulum, but every once in a while I'll bring out the rods.
What do you feel you use works best for you? Is it the pendulum or the rods?
For me, the pendulum works best.
Yeah.
And that may be just because I've used it so much that I'm more proficient at it, but I'm real comfortable with the pendulum.
Sure. And how long have you been using the pendulum for?
God, probably a quarter of a century.
Wow, that's a long
Wow.
time. So I would say that you are an expert at that, correct?
I self-taught.
Self-taught. Well, aren't we self-taught with everything in this world? I mean, everything is
Pretty
self-taught.
much, yeah.
We learn from other people, but that's because those other people learned how to do something as well. So, I mean, but you're just finding out what works for you and how well it
Right.
works.
Yeah. To me, everybody has a psychic skill. This is the one that works for me.
Yeah. And if that's the way it's going to work for you, I mean, why quit now, right? So, absolutely. And so, my question is, I hear stories from people that they have usually either one or the other, one being the spiritual beings that are coming to visit, or the other is they are having these extraterrestrial visits. But this is the first time that I've heard about someone who's actually having both at the same time or consecutively. Is that the
Well,
way?
we were fortunate in the sense that we were able to communicate directly with an extraterrestrial that we call ET, but it was the individual who was primarily concerned with this long-term program that Lindsay was participating in.
Right.
So it was quite refreshing that the pendulum is an excellent way to communicate directly with ET.
And did you find out whether or not, or what's the best? Let me ask this question differently. The beings that were doing these experiments with her, had they been along for the same amount of time that when the contract was actually signed? I mean, were you getting any proof or any just questions answered that these beings that had been doing these abductions with her had been along for that whole 4,000 year period? Do they live that long?
The impression I got, we didn't specifically get into that kind of detail because that was deviating from the focus on Lindsay's other experiences, but that yes, there was a team, a specific team that appeared to be consistent
Right.
Throughout time, and it was kind of managed by this individual that we referenced as ET, that was principally communicating with us.
And I would have to guess that they don't live in a sense of space and time that we do.
That would be my guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I mean, for us to imagine that there's someone out there living who's been alive for 3,000 or 4,000 years, that's quite a long time. But I would have to imagine, again, as I tell people, spirit, where they are in that realm, when spirit leaves here and they leave their body and they go to another realm, they are thinking, oh, we're going to walk through that door anytime to join them at some point in a couple of days. But a couple of days to us may be 30 or 40 years as opposed a couple of days to them. So I would have to imagine that would be the same thing for these beings as well.
It would seem so. The spirit work we keep getting is like once you cross over, time and distance are irrelevant. They don't really exist over there.
Yeah.
And in some ways,
they just are.
They just are. In some ways, the ET experience, the extraterrestrials, in their ability to travel vast distances, are apparently tapping into some sort of
portal.
Yes, some sort of way they're tapping into a similar experience, or maybe the same experience.
Yeah,
maybe a dimensional thing. We really don't know.
Have you had any experiences throughout this process of actually seeing anything as far as what we would call the ETs? There we go, man. I must have hit something on the nail.
Let me see. What do you think, George?
I don't know, Dan. You want to go first, or?
I don't know. First, something is going. I don't know what it is. Something is going on between the ETs and me and George. I don't know what it is. George is seeing orbs all the time.
Okay.
And he's seeing crafts. And out here, I'm 1,200 miles away. I'm seeing the TikTok type craft that have been coming out lately. I've seen disc craft, and I've seen a lot of lights, bright lights in the sky exhibiting non-ballistic motion. And that has upticked greatly since we've been involved with Lindsay.
Yeah, we see them as well down here
Oh yeah,
in Sierra
I've seen
Vista.
them down there.
Yeah, we've seen them over the top of the mountains right next to our house, and of course, what's down here in Sierra Vista, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. Well, I was down in your part of the country a year or so ago doing an outdoor ceremony, and I looked up, and there were bright lights exhibiting non-ballistic motion over the dragoons.
Yeah, and being here in Sierra Vista, I mean, we're right next to the largest intelligence base in the United States.
Fort Huachuca.
Yeah, Fort Huachuca. Yeah, I'm right down the road from Fort Huachuca. Yeah, it's not too far, but yeah, there's stuff going on there as well. So like myself, I'm spirit medium, but so the beings that I'm in contact who are they touch me on my face for yes and no answers. I get different touches for different answers, but I always get touches on my forehead and on my face. Those are all yes answers, and I only get one that feels going down the side of my face, feels like a tear running down my face, and that's a no answer. But the other ones feel like blood dripping across my face. And then the ones that I'm in contact with are what we would refer to as archangels. But as I tell everybody, they're not men with wings. They don't have wings and a shield and a sword, and they're not fighting a battle in heaven and all that crap, because that's just brought to us by the people who want to tell us how to live our lives the way they want us to live it, and give them 10%, because, how did they know about 10% back then? Because they were kings and queens. That's who wrote those books. But these beings that I see all the time, I've only seen one or two that actually look human. Most of them, or some of them, look humanoid, but not exactly human. But the ones that I see on a frequent basis, in the very beginning, I saw these beautiful bluish white lights coming up from the floor. Now I actually see them. And when I see them, how many archangels do I have with me? They tell me all of them. How many is that? Thousands. But the ones that I see in my room all the time, it's like looking at these 7 or 8 foot praying mantises standing in my room. And I just know what they are and what they do for us and what they do for me. And they're here to try to help us, and they're trying to give us information to help us get through our lives all the time. But yeah, whenever I see them, I see their big giant bug eyes, and they're looking at me, and I see their little arms coming down. And but they touch me a lot too, not just for answers, but as they tell me, they're preparing me for something else that's coming. And so they touch me all over my skin, and they're like that movie, The Avatar, where the guy's getting he's in this little clear bubble thing, and they're working on him. Well, that's what they're doing on me, and they tell me they're doing that because they're working on my soul, so I can see them and hear them and communicate with them better all the time. Do you guys see these types of beings as well, or are you having any of those types of experiences at all?
Not in that fashion. Probably the most poignant experience I had in the process of researching this book was actually December 28th, 2020, 7 a.m. in the morning. Wake up, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to get rolling. Go into the living room, open the blinds. It's pre-dawn, and look across the street, and hovering above my neighbor's house is a 20-foot orangish yellow sphere. I'm just looking at that thing and making every possible observation. The street light below it had a light pollution bulb, so it's kind of an orangey yellow light, very similar to the color of the sphere. I noticed that the circumference of the sphere was not hard or fixed. It was kind of like feathered, like a painter would feather, and it had some shimmer to it. So it was not a static or dull thing. You could see the streaks of sunlight off in the distance behind it, and it was just the most remarkable thing. And the second remarkable thing was what I decided to do after thoroughly observing it, which one would think would be to step outside and look at it directly, or hell, grab the iPhone, see if I can get a picture of it.
Sure.
But what I ended up doing was go feed the cats. Get a cup of coffee.
How many cats do you have, George? How
I
many
got
do you
2
have?
porch kitties.
Oh yeah, I have 9 cats here at my house, so I get it. So do you? I'm sure you understand that at the same time that you opened the curtains and was observing them, that they were observing you. I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely. In fact, let me finish the story.
they were probably sitting inside going, "Oh, he just opened the curtains. He's looking at us now. Awesome." So
Well, when I walked back by with a cup of coffee, of course, it was gone. And that's when it went click. I said, okay,
Right.
all right, I see what they're doing.
Sure.
They were giving me a taste of what's known as alien apathy.
Okay.
And that's the case when someone has an encounter or some experience and they react to it in a way that is far different from what they would usually do or would be expected to do.
Sure.
And that night, when I was meditating on it, because it was just such an incredible experience, it just nailed that, yes, everything that we're researching, everything we're doing, it is absolutely genuine, real, and being encouraged to continue. And I got a sense of a phrase to describe what had occurred that morning. And that phrase was diplomatic reveal. And I think that was a very precise way to describe what had happened to me that morning. It was very personal. It was done strictly for me. And that's something I thought back that when I was interviewing people back in the 80s and 90s, that for many of them, they felt it was a very personal encounter.
Sure.
And now I understood what they meant. So
Sure.
there was just a lot of information conveyed in just observing the sphere and in understanding that they were giving me a taste of how the communication works on a mental level. And it is very, very subtle, very subtle.
Yeah, but you felt it enough that you absolutely knew this is exactly what was going on. This is what was taking place.
Well, this is literal. I mean, I'm literally seeing it. I mean, but I'm allowed.
It was enough for you to make a statement that you were like, yeah, this is going on.
This was Beyond the Veil with Daniel Jackson with UFOs, UAPs, pendulums, star people, alien abductions. What's next? For more information about Dan and George, please see the description of the podcast for links to their websites. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Beyond the Veil with Daniel Jackson.